Hello everybody, welcome to our new Sunday talk show, The World This Week. This week, we saw the economic summit in Davos. Iranian and Israeli leaders talked to each other without talking to each other. In Ukraine, fire on the streets of Kiev and a violent crackdown. A bombing wave hits Egypt and deadly demonstrations this weekend, marking 3 years to the end of the Mubarak regime. Major security concerns in Moscow and Sochi just before the Winter Olympics. Here in Israel, Rabbi Gate. A New York rabbi is suspected of bribing Israel's top police brass. These are some of the issues we'll touch upon this Sunday. We'll start in Davos, Switzerland. Iranian President Ruhani was there, and so were Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Shimon Peres.
We have had a history of deep economic and trade ties with European states. With the implementation of the Geneva Agreement last week and its subsequent steps, Iran's relations with European states will be entirely normalized. Engagement between Iran and the United States in the past months has also entered a new phase, and for the first time, politicians from both countries have negotiated.
They're not reassured by the soft words that were said here this morning by the president of Iran. They get it.
He didn't express support for peace in the Middle East. He's the only leader I know of that didn't say clearly the time has come to make peace between Israel and the Arabs. He doesn't need the 5+1 to stop building missiles. He doesn't need their permission to stop sending arms to Hezbollah, to stop sending arms to Africa.
Also in Davos this week, a group of Israeli business people and leaders calling upon whoever to make peace. We spoke with retired General Danny Rothschild about the group. It's called Breaking the Impasse.
The goals of breaking the impasse, actually from both sides, the Palestinian and the Israeli side, is to say as one delegation to the world and to the participants in Davos that it's about time to do something, because if we are not going to do anything, the situation is going to go from bad to worse.
General, aren't you afraid that this mix of business and politics will eventually backfire?
No, we are not. Actually, we are not dealing with politics. In our group, on the Israeli side, you have people from the right, from the center, and from the left. And we are not dealing with a substantial issue. We are dealing with the need to do it.
Do you have any interaction with the other side saying the same?
Well, actually, the delegation is a joint delegation, a Palestinian and Israeli delegation. We are about 100 Israelis and about 80 Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza. And those Palestinians and Israelis are appearing here as one delegation, the BTI delegation.
Well, thank you very much, General Danny Rothschild in Davos, Switzerland.
Thank you.
With us this Sunday, our panel, Alon Pinkas, former Israeli Consul General in New York, and Barbara Opel-Rom, Defense News Bureau Chief in Israel.
Hello.
Barbara, is this the UN all over again or Davos?
Well, I mean, it's quite remarkable how far we've come since the UN General Assembly just 4.5 months ago. The P5+1 is now in its early implementation phase, and while Prime Minister Netanyahu's concerns about the Iranian nuclear threat are still valid, and his warnings not to buy into Ruhani's charm offensive are still valid, his threats of unilateral military action have long faded into the background. And I would say in Davos, it was like elevator music. The World Economic Community heard Netanyahu's pessimistic perspective on things, but no one was listening because they were focused on the business. So much money to be made through reinvestment in the Iranian infrastructure and rebuilding its economy. It's just amazing.
Won. Alon, do you have a winner there?
Well, if we're looking at PR and the charm offensive, this is in the best of 7 series. The Iranians have won both the first games. They won at the UN and they won at Davos. That said, Yaakov, it's not a zero-sum game. It doesn't mean that the agreement is going to be implemented in full, but I agree 100% with Barbara. This is about business, and the sanctions regime is slowly cracking and will collapse at some point.
So Netanyahu was right
About
the sanctions.
Absolutely,
No,
absolutely.
he was right about the sanctions regime collapsing. He was wrong about the world listening to him. The world did not listen to him. The world has no problem with the sanctions regime collapsing. Tell you more than that. This fallacy that Netanyahu will speak to his buddies in Congress and they will reenact or re-legislate or increase the level of sanction legislation is silly, because no one in China, India, South Korea, or Russia is impressed by what Congressman Joe or Schmo says. And so the sanctions regime is in danger of collapsing.
And at Davos, we've already seen serious planning to start investing there. Conservative estimates show more than $30 billion in immediate potential. Iran is the second largest oil supplier behind Saudi Arabia, and the second largest gas supplier. Granted, potential, the capacity
Money
is...
talks again.
Absolutely.
Money talks again. Not far away from there in Montreux, Switzerland, the Geneva talks there. We saw the clash between Secretary Kerry and the Syrian foreign minister. How can Kerry keep saying that Assad must go and at the same time make deals with him?
I don't know. That's incompatible and that's inconsistent, and that's very difficult to understand. He's looking at Assad. Assad needs to go as a statement of intent by the U.S. The dictators of Assad's type must go. That doesn't mean that this is an action item. This doesn't mean that this is policy. But I'll give you a heretic's view on this. I think the U.S., Israel, and Syria, and Russia, are all happy with Assad staying in power. They can't say so publicly. It's immoral. It's unethical. It's not a nice thing to say when people are butchered by the hundreds and thousands every month. That established in terms of geopolitics and the composition of Syria and what may evolve or transpire in Syria, all three countries, and that may include even Turkey, which supports the resurgence. Everyone wants Assad to stay right now. Even a bleeding Assad, which provides some level of stability and some level of predictability, is probably preferable to these gentlemen, to Netanyahu, to Netanyahu, to Obama, and to Putin more than the unpredictability of Al-Qaeda.
Right. Incidentally, Barbara, Israeli Air Force released some videos this week of Israeli jet fighters dogfighting over the northern part of Israel. What's the message?
It's psychological warfare. It's posturing. It's always nice to see that the IDF is well prepared and very, very ready to meet any challenges that they may have. But as I noted, the Israeli threat of unilateral attack is so far pushed into the background, and it's more for public PR consumption than anything else.
Okay, don't go away. We'll be right back with you to talk about Egypt. Let's go to Russia now, just a few days before the Winter Olympics, and the Russians are extremely worried about security. Hello to Ilan Goren, our correspondent in Moscow.
Yes, hello, Jacob from Moscow.
How tense is it, Ilan?
You know, I wanted to show you and our viewers the new security measures that are in place all around this country, and even here in the Russian capital and in one of the main train stations. But I wasn't allowed to film here. I was banned by a local police officer. And this is a similar experience that journalists go through all around this country. Local authorities, especially security forces, are extremely anxious and tense in the run-up to the Olympic Games in Sochi, which are due to begin 2 weeks from now. In Sochi itself and around it, the Russian authorities have built what was dubbed by the Russian president a ring of steel. This is an area the size of Rhode Island, an American state, that is supposed to be impregnable to terrorists. When I've been to Sochi, I've seen frogmen, local commandos, warships, drones up in the sky, anti-aircraft missiles, batteries in place. We've seen many measures, tens of thousands of soldiers and policemen that have been spread all across this region. But it seems that this effort is I wouldn't say doomed, but a very, very complicated one. Sochi is located about 1,500 kilometers or 1,000 miles west of the North Caucasus restive region of Dagestan. And according to some reports we've heard in the last few days, a few female suicide bombers, suspected suicide bombers, have already been able to infiltrate this ring of steel that was erected around the Olympic venues. A hunt is on for them right now as we speak in Sochi, and the main fear is that they will try to disrupt the torch relay by attacking the torch relay with suicide bombings in the days in the run-up leading to the Olympic Games in Sochi.
Well, if you mentioned this torch, it wasn't an easy ride, was it, so far?
Yeah, these so-called black widows from the Caucasus region are not the only problem that the torch relay had in the last few weeks and months. It broke records in so many ways, on so many levels. It's the longest torch relay in the history of Olympic Games. 65,000 kilometers, went up to space and down to Lake Baikal. But also the torch itself went out 44 times. One of the torchbearers died of a heart attack in the middle at the end of his part of the relay. Another one caught fire. The main hope is, of course, that the torch itself will burn. The eternal flame will not go out when it reaches the stadium in Sochi on February the 7th.
We'll have to wait and see. It looks like anything can happen. And we'll see you later, I guess, from there. Thank you, Ilan Goren in Moscow.
Thank you, Jacob. Goodbye.
Look what's happening in Egypt this weekend. 49 people were killed just this weekend in these protests in Cairo. Alon Pinkas, former Israeli Consul General in New York. Can you imagine this?
Yeah. Unfortunately, tragically, the answer is yes. 49 people dead in a country in which everyone prided that it did not devolve into violence as opposed to Syria, and no one cares. No one talks about it in Davos. No one raises questions in the Security Council. The New York Times doesn't publish editorials about this. This is, Egypt is on the verge of being a lost state. Not a failed state, a lost state. A state that the world doesn't care about anymore. You saw that in terms of the U.S. lack of involvement. You see this in the lack of interest on the Russians, and you see it in how little the world pays attention to it.
Barbara, it's a cynical world. What?
Very cynical and cruel world, but here actually I think that Israel, working with the United States, is actually going to lead the agenda. Egypt has been very, very forceful in containing Hamas and clamping down on Hamas, not only the brotherhood within Egypt, but the smuggling into Gaza. And at this critical stage of negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians, as much leverage to prop up the government of Sisi and the Egyptian government there will be brought to bear in order to allow Israel to try to nudge it to make more concessions toward a greater peace.
Barbara Opel-Rome, Alon Pinkas, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, this Sunday, the wheel that drives bikes in Copenhagen from MIT by an Israeli inventor. We say hello to Asaf Biderman at MIT.
Hello, Yaakov. How are you doing?
All right. Well, tell us about this Wheel of Fortune of yours.
Well, the Wheel of Fortune is called the Copenhagen Wheel. Mm-hmm. It's a rear wheel that you can throw on almost any bike. Installation is very simple. You just twist two screws, you download an app, and your bike is souped up. And the idea is that it captures your energy when you brake or when you go downhill, and then it gives you a push automatically, making it much easier to cycle through hills or over large distances.
What about power, battery, recharging, all of that?
Well, there is a battery inside. There's also a motor, which is a generator as well. Mm-hmm. There is an embedded control system and about a dozen sensors. All of this is embedded within a red casing that's completely wireless. It learns how you pedal, and then it integrates with your motion seamlessly, helping you as you ride.
I'm curious, why Copenhagen of all places?
Well, it started from a partnership with the mayor's office in Copenhagen back in 2009. The key question we're asking is, how can we get more people to cycle? Basically, people rather not get to work sweating. And we looked at electric bicycles. It's a booming market. It's a few $1 billion in Europe. But they're quite clunky and heavy, very pricey. So we decided to take a new approach to that, develop something that's designed, something that's lightweight, something that's very easy to use, makes cycling fun. Copenhagen Wheel is intended to help cities that are as big as LA or Sao Paulo become relevant for cycling, maybe as much as Copenhagen is.
So from now on, not only Copenhagen, other places as well.
Yeah, we have licensed patents that MIT has filed for the Copenhagen Wheel and spun it off into a new company called Super Pedestrian, operating here out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, where we develop and build the wheels. It's gone on pre-sale about a month ago, and people bought it from all over the world, about 45 countries, almost everywhere in Europe, here in the US, all the way to New Caledonia, next to Australia.
Wow. Good luck. Thank you very much, Sabir Rahman at MIT. Thank you.
Thank you, Jakob.
And this has been The World This Week. We'll see you here next Sunday. Have a good week.